So, I mean, we have now talked about these, success drivers and pitfalls, and you also talked or touched upon at least some international business examples. Could you maybe give us 1, 2 examples of an IB situation, and maybe how the culture had played a role in this, or how this was affected by maybe some cultural challenges? So that would be interesting, I think, for us to learn a little bit from.
International negotiation is a really interesting area of negotiation, and as we touched upon, understanding the culture of the other side is really important. When I was younger, a negotiator, I found it more difficult to negotiate with, for example, American negotiators, because they are quite straightforward to the point, and sometimes it feels that they are not so eager to build a good relationship. So you might feel like they are, because they would invite you for dinner during negotiation processes and so on, but they could be really tough in the negotiation room. They would go straight to business. They would say, we need this, and a bit more like win-lose approach, if you ever heard that term. However, with time, I learned also to deal with those type of negotiations. If we take Scandinavia, for example, where mindset is already more collaborative from the beginning, it's a little bit like trust is already given you as a benefit of a doubt. It's easier in a way to negotiate between 2 Danish companies, because if they are in that collaborative mindset, because they'll come in and they'll say, okay, we have this goal, let's treat it as a more common problem solving, and find that solution. Let's not avoid difficult topics. And it can really be very fruitful negotiation process, at least in my experience. If we talk about Middle East, there the relationship and trust plays a very big role. So counting in the time before negotiation really starts is really important, because you'll probably spend a lot of time together. There'll be dinners. You'll also allow yourself to talk a bit more personal topics like your family, just to build that trust together before you go into the negotiation topics. And I like that you mentioned Germany. My experience with German negotiators is very similar, like you mentioned, that they are quite straightforward and they are task oriented. Like if you already have a contract, you would often go back to the contract and say, but we had this in the contract. It's very well structured. Punctual on time if you have a clear agenda, and so on. So there are those differences culturally, and even within Europe you can notice. You would think it's one continent, and even some differences between Swedes and Danes you can find. But of course we should never look at every negotiator on a country level, because it's important to remember that the person across the negotiation table, they might have lived in different countries and they might have had a lot of different experience. And it's important to mention that corporate culture also plays a role. What's the internal strategy? How internally you're taught to be? And all of those elements makes the negotiation a very interesting topic.
I have heard from colleagues that in some countries it seems to be a strategy that you go out in the evening and you drink a lot of alcohol together. And you also want to see the negotiation partner in a not so sober mood anymore, to find out what is really the real intentions, or what is the underlying motives that might become more visible if somebody has had some alcohol. And I found that quite interesting. Have you ever had a situation where you need to drink a lot? And
yes, I also had a situation where I was presented alcohol, a glass of wine or 2 glasses of wine already around lunchtime during negotiation. And that's where you think, okay, that's a different setting. And it's always like thinking like, is that right? Is that correct? Okay, others are doing it. Should you do it? Because maybe, what if I say no? Will they get offended? Right? What do you cross that? You draw that line for them. It's really important.
And what did you do? Did you have the wine or?
1 glass I did. Yes, it was with one of the Spanish potential business partners, and it's also important. The relationship is important for them, so it's important to spend some time. But I also draw the line saying let's continue in the evening after we
Yeah.
touched upon the rest of the topics.
What kind of preparations do you do for these cross-cultural negotiations? Do you, I mean, just, in quotation marks, build on your experience that you have developed throughout the years, or do you also use some of these conceptual frameworks, Hofstede, Globe, Erin Meyer? I mean, there are a lot of different things that you could use. Is there anything that you use for the preparation?
Yes, I do research, of course, but at the same time, I rely on my network. So I am very grateful to have a network of business professionals and also people who negotiate or have their own businesses that live across the world and can advise from their experience. It shouldn't be the only touch point, but of course you get more personal stories and examples, and then doing your own research as well. And then collaborating with some of the negotiation institutes that might have more experience can also be helpful.
Are there any kind of country-by-country combinations that you say? You already said in between Danish companies, it seems to be a little bit easier to come to a win-win situation. Are there more of these good combinations, I would say, of negotiating countries or partners? Or are there really combinations where you say, ooh, this is really that will be a tough challenge because they are so far from each other in the way that they approach a negotiation? Is there any such examples?
That's a really daring,
Yeah.
daring question, right? I mean, overall, that's where my legal part of me comes in. I have to put a disclaimer. No, but overall, I think it really depends on your negotiation and negotiation strategy and then the process and being aware of cultural differences. But from my perspective, or my experience, I think it could be more difficult if you have one party from the United States, for example, with a more competing approach, more outcome oriented, and on the other side you would have somebody from, let's say, Middle East, relationship oriented. Of course, if they are both aware of their differences, they might still reach a really good agreement, and there are plenty of examples. My other experience, and actually experience that I often encounter, is a Danish company negotiating with a US-based company. And even there's already a difference because Scandinavians have a tendency to go into negotiation with more collaborative, like let's solve this problem together. While some American companies would have this competing strategy. And although I am the fan of the collaborative approach, it's important to recognize that if you come into negotiation with this, let's solve the problem together, but the other side is not there yet, you have to find ways to bring that side also to collaborative approach. And sometimes it could make sense that you also start a bit more from the competing strategy, so-called, and maybe enter a journey together into a collaborative set. So.
Thank you very much, Une, for sharing all your experiences with us. This was very helpful for me, and I guess it was also very helpful for the audience to learn a little bit from your experience in all these different negotiation situations. And I hope that this video will contribute to some better, more cooperative negotiations in future. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me here, and I hope the information and experiences I shared has been useful and will be useful for the students. And
I'm sure it will. Thank you.